Okay, we'll try share the screen. Yep, we're gonna drop everything and just share the screen. We've got the PDF in front. That's the quickest way. Yes.
Says the screen is being shared, but I do not see anything.
Want me to email you that quick?
I've got to find the right tab. Window. Yep. Nope.
So do you want me to email you? Note 12 slides?
Yeah, I thought I could just quickly put it here. Do you see the slides? Do you see the
Yes,
note well?
We can now see that.
You can now see the note well? Okay, that's all we needed, folks. Let me try to turn to the right view.
Okay, so Sue, while you're doing that, we are at top of hour. We have a bunch of people that have just joined. This is an excellent time for you to test your microphone if you need to do so.
Especially since you're can not do that when you're asleep. Okay. Can you at least see the note well, even though I have my slides to the left?
We can see the note well screen.
Okay.
Ready?
Okay. Jeff, why don't you give the introduction? I'll do or if you'd give the introduction, I'll leave my slides on the note well, and you can go through the agenda. The agenda's online, so we're just going to live with that. I really screwed up.
Sure. Let me pull up the agenda. It's up the screen to look for Notewell. 1 second, please. So good morning, IDR. This is our interim meeting for 29th of August. And we have a number of items on our agenda. You can see that Sue is displaying the Notewell, and we'll be moving to chair slides momentarily. So the agenda is the number of working group last call and adoptions that are in progress. We'll be having a presentation on SD-WAN edge discovery, another presentation on Bgp updates for 5G edge servers metadata, and then we'll be moving into Bgp routes with color. The first item will be the chair's review of the Bgp current CT status. We'll be having a new presentation for Bgp colorful prefix routing CPR for SRv6 based services. And the final item on the agenda is a set of proposed interop procedures for Bgp routes with color. Do we have any agenda bashing? Okay, I see nothing in chat and no hands at the queue. So Sue, why don't you go ahead and take over the adoption calls?
Yep, I'll stop. The note well was shown to you beforehand, not quite in my best form, but now I'm going to pick up the working group calls. Now, hopefully you can see the slides. Are we seeing the slides come in? Good. Well, we didn't take August off. So let me go through the adoption call that we've done for August and our current status. The adoption calls are, just a minute. Working group last call.
Sue, just as an FYI, I don't see the slides. I don't know if other folks are seeing it. Maybe it's a problem with my end.
Yeah. WGLC slide.
Slides are visible.
Yes. Thank you.
You're seeing them, right, Jeff?
Yes, just came through.
Okay. So working group last calls. We've started a last call for draft IETF-IDR, that's BFD subcode. There's 2 implementations, Juniper and Arista. We've got 2 pending working group, 1 draft IETF-IDR SR policy IFIT that we need implementation data, and we've got a BGP model. We hope to get the BGP model. It's sitting there because it's one of those ready any moment to go to last call. We've got draft Dunbar IDR 5G Edge Compute App metadata. We extended the first 2-week call to end after this interim. We've had about 16 people interested. The link to the CANBOF is the question that was raised. The authors say the customer need is now, and the BGP is solution is targeted at the customer, and IDR focus is tactical rather than CAN's long-term big approach. So if it helps CAN in the future, great. If not, that's sort of your shepherd's viewpoint, because the customers are looking for immediate. At least that's what the authors say. You've got another day or so to give me feedback on that. Linda's giving a presentation. We have Spaghetti, IDR deprecate 8, 9, 10. We had very little traffic. This may have been overshadowed by another one of the author group's draft on send hold timer. So I haven't seen enough. Job was going to be here to do some presenting, but apparently the train strike in the Netherlands has caused him to be unable to come. We'll probably extend it and ask Job to see if anyone to push it a little bit more. Draft Jang IDRTS flow spec SR-v6 policy. There's not a presentation for that today. There's about 12 people having interest. It's got another couple days, so if the authors are listening, it needs to have a few more. What it does is it augments the draft flow spec redirect IPIT IPO2. It's a flow spec V1 edition because it targets the use of an existing draft. Draft Wang IDR VPN prefib ORF has been getting a lot of play on the list. I will need to go through a detailed review. I'm also the shepherd. It's circling around the Robert, Igor, John, and Jim. I'll probably talk to each of you directly and then see how we go from there. The Rogue PE, I need to, as the shepherd, talk to these people, present a discussion to the chairs, and then we'll decide the next step. The open issue is a Rogue PE. You know, some of the proponents say it should be kicked out by ops, and they're sort of not telling us how. That's the group are against it, and the discussion is protocol shutdown. But folks, I have been focused on CAR-DT, and I need to do a better deep dive on that. The next 3 drafts that are going to be scheduled are Utaro, and Jim, if you're on the call, just a minute, let me see if Jim is. Nope. I need to see if he's updated his draft. Another one is a draft SAS IDR Max prefix inbound. This may be the reason I want to talk to the 4 authors is the Max prefix inbound draft did not get any support. It got crickets, meaning silence. But again, the authors who are objecting to the VPN or draft, one of the suggested solutions was inbound prefixes. And lastly, we have John Scudder's BGP entropy label capability redo. We're going to run those simultaneously and then see what happens. I am going to delay to the 6th, so I have about a week to clean up the rest, since they were my shepherds, and maybe I'll tag one of my co-chairs to do the rest. Exciting drafts on the list was Spaghetti IDR BGP send holder. And again, the chairs will send out a more detailed review. The detailed reviews for the CAR CT seem to provide helpful information. That's it. I've done it hopefully in 10 minutes, and we'll go on to the next presentation, which is Linda. And I see Linda in the room, and I'm going to load preloaded slides. Just a minute. Linda, I'm gonna load your preloaded slides.
Okay.
Do you see the slides, folks? I don't see it yet.
No.
Neither am I. It's okay. I've up. Hold on. Operator error. Linda, can you see the slides?
Yes, we saw the slides. Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So so this is give a very brief update of the progress made so far for the SD-WAN edge discovery, and we didn't get a chance to present it at the IETF 114. Next page, please. So here are some related drafts. One is in the BAS BGP SD-WAN usage, just showing how BGP used for control SD-WAN. And another one is the problem space, net to cloud problem statement and gap analysis, which was discussed at the RTG working group in IETF 114. So today's discussion is mainly just to illustrate the BGP update messages, BGP updates being proposed in the draft, how they are actually used for one example SD-WAN topology. Next page, please. So here's the topology example. Here we have three CPEs. They are interconnected by both MPLS and public internet. Specifically, we're looking from the perspective of CPE2. It has two WAN ports and have a bunch of client routes. Okay, next page, please. So, oh, we missed one. We missed one page. Yes, this page. Okay. So the main part of this draft SD-WAN discovery is to show that for CPE2, how does CPE2 let other nodes discover the property of CPE2? There are two main parts for CPE2 to advertise. One part is his own WAN properties. For example, CPE2 need to let all their peers know his WAN ports, which has ISP1, like 192, the WAN port address. Another one is 170, the WAN port address. And also need to let other nodes know that his loopback address, so that other CPEs can encapsulate the information in the proper secure tunnel to CPE2. So that's one part. Another part is exactly same as MPLS VPN, advertise the client routes and with the prefix and different route target. And only addition to that is using the encapsulation extended community, which is specified in the RFC 9012 section 4.1, and also use color extended community to associate the client routes with appropriate underlay properties. Next page, please. So here is one example to show that for CPE2, which has two WAN ports, one is 192.0.0.1, another one is from service provider 2 with the WAN address 170.0.0.1. So CPE2 need to send at least two updates to other node, to his peers. Next, sorry, I haven't finished that one yet. Sue, can you go back to the previous page? Okay, so CPE2 need to send at least two SD-WAN update. One is indicating the property associated with WAN port 192, which include see if this port is behind the net, need to advertise its net property, need to advertise its encapsulation type, and need to advertise his WAN address, and also need to advertise the public IP address so that remote node can use the public IP address to reach this node. Optionally, it can also include service provider information, ISP sub-TLB. That's optional. So that's the WAN port property update message under the SD-WAN underlay update. Next page, please. Okay. Okay. So this one is to show that CP2 need to inform other party, their peers, his IPsec attributes. So the IPsec terminate at CP2 can be terminated at multiple ways. You can terminate at the port level, like for example, the IPsec can be terminated at the physical port of 192 or 170, or can be terminated at the loopback. This CP2 need to advertise, like if he only expect the IPsec terminate at his loopback address, and he need to indicate the port ID equal to 0 and advertise all the IPsec related information in the IPsec sub-TLBs. If CP2 need to desire the IPsec to be terminated at the port, he can alternatively advertising the IPsec related information specifically for this particular port. So that's the SD-WAN IPsec attribute update. Next page, please. So this is the client route update. It just illustrates what bits, what path attributes are included in the client route. The client route, the path attribute, multi-reach NLRI is still the same. You have same AFI, same SASE, same whatever SASE you want to advertise for the client routes. And you extend CP2 will add this path attribute for the extended community, encapsulation extended community, indicating the tunnel type in SD-WAN hybrid. Also include the color. The color is really to group group of routes together. Next page, please. Next page. Okay, so here's a second example. Sue, I think I missed one page, which is showing the page 5, which shows the one side has multiple CPEs. Yes, this one. So this one is to show that in SD-WAN, in some SD-WAN deployment, there could be multiple CPEs at the edge. Like for example, you may have a cloud data center, you may have two gateways, and both gateway can reach the client routes. And in the SD-WAN update, it is reflected by the color ID, site ID, basically indicating this is particular. And to they can use the WAN address of the CPE22 or CPE21 to reach their desired client routes. So this is just showing another option. Okay, thank you. Okay, go back. Okay, so this is the second example. Like, for example, you may have a second group of VPN client routes, and is identified by the purple. So the purple will associate with different set of the property of the tunnel. Could be having different IPsec tunnels, or could have different encapsulation, or could have different encryption mechanism. Next page, please. This just gave an example for the purple routes. The purple route, what I call purple is really just a numerical number, just for the easy of illustration, I call purple. So it gave them the type of tunnel encapsulation attributes included for this particular group of routes. Next page, please. So for the IPsec attribute distribution, because IPsec attributes, there are lots of attributes associated with IPsec. So here in our draft, if we are proposing two different mechanisms to advertising the IPsec attributes. One option could be the CPE advertise all the detailed attributes, encryption mechanism, the transformer, and the public key, and all those needed information. Another possibility is there's a pre-established IPsec security association between the peer node already. And here, the CPE2 only need to include the IPsec Security Association's ID, identifier. And with that, it makes it simpler. So just two different ways to advertise the IPsec attributes. Next page, please. So this is the last page. Basically, this SD-WAN SAFI is for the underlay property distribution. It will include the port ID, the color, which represent the site's information, and the node ID. The node ID is really for IPsec termination at the node address. So the remote node knows that in order to reach this 2222, his WAN port, the IPsec outer encapsulation address should be the WAN port address. So that's it. And this draft has been implementation, one finished implementation, another one underway. So we're hoping to finish the other one and go for a working group last call. Thank you. That's the end. Any questions?
Are there any questions for Linda? Our hope was if we keep giving little updates on these drafts heading for working group last call, we can let the implementers know as they're heading toward final implementation. Any comments? Okay, if there are no comments, I will go to the next presentation, which is also Linda's. So give me a moment, and I will go to the picking of a new one. Just a minute.
Cossack is going to present that.
Bissett is? Okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah, can you hear me? Sure, okay.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Can you see it?
Yes, I see the slides. So hello
Okay, please
everyone.
go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to present this BGP update for 5G edge service metadata draft, which is in the work group adoption call. Just a quick update on the first slide. That we have recently changed the name from the edge compute app metadata to a 5G edge service metadata. we felt this is more appropriate based on that kind of recommendations in the mailing alias. So moving forward with this name. Next slide, please. So just a quick update on this, nothing changed. So in this kind of a diagram, left hand side represents that 5G network, where that 5G sites are connected through that ingress routers, which is RPSA1, RPSA2, to that regional data centers. On the right hand side, there are four regional data centers represented in this picture: R1, R2, R3, R5. Those are typically hosting that Anycast address-based services, the public IP, Anycast IP-based services, and these services and that kind of the edge service metadata, which we have kind of captured capacity index, site preference, or load index, would be propagated by these edge data centers, gateways, to the ingress routers through route reflector. So it would be propagated through NLRI and the BGP update, and these sub-TLBs would be included to capture that specific capacity, site preference, or load index. And when that ingress gets it, it will have a separate compute engine, which would be kind of fed by the BGP and take a kind of a determine the cost factor for the different next stops, since it will have a multi-pathing to that different gateways. And based on that cost factor, it can associate the different weighted load balance in the forwarding to to forward the traffic appropriately to that specific egress gateways. So that's the kind of a key idea. Like we are bringing the routing solutions and kind of do the proper load balancing based on this edge service metadata from the ingress, so that traffic kind of dynamically change how this when this edge metadata services kind of gives that indications this based on that site availability or not. Next slide, please. So this is an important sub-TLB. So we kind of captured it a little more in detail. So this is a capacity sub-TLB, indicates the site ID and site capacity index. Site capacity index could be any type of values, like a between 0 to 100. It represents that availability of that specific site capacity. It could be, like example, here it could be operating at 100% capacity or 50% or zero. Zero means like the site is not available anymore. The site ID is more of a local representation. So it represents the group of routes or specific services kind of a hosted in that within a specific. So basically, it's identifying here a group of routes, and that group of routes, for that, like how the capacity is kind of impacted, it will be propagated through the BGP NLRI. And when RPSA gets that, like again, it could take intelligent decisions and communicate to the forwarding, and kind of traffic can be changed accordingly. So that's its next slide. So this is just a kind of a showing the past reference. We are not using, there was a drop from Robert on that aggregated withdraw that was kind of, I think it was there for quite some time. It's how the MP aggregate withdraw mechanism was done by the AHPs, the different happy SAPI case, right? So it's just a reference, and we kind of took the kind of idea from there, but here the use case is different, and we are using that capacity sub-TLB to deprefer the paths for a group of routes which is identified by the specific site ID. And again, the capacity index, when it goes to 0, that is
Cossack. Just give us a minute. I'll see if he reappears. If not, Linda, would you take over for him?
Okay. Just continue his talk. So this one, the current approach is really to prefer a path, a group of paths to a group of routes. So basically equivalent to like a fiber cut, and all those group of routes become unreachable. I think that's it. Next page. There's two other metadata being proposed in this draft. One is the preference index and load index. The preference index is a value between from 1 to 100, is to really to differentiate different sites. For example, you could have a cell site within the metro area where all the management systems.
Cossack is back. If you want to.
Yeah, some reason I don't know what happened. Like my connections may be blipped. So yeah, as Linda was mentioning, there are two other sub TLBs, which is preference sub TLBs and the load index load sub TLB. So preference also could be kind of presented by the site. What is the site preference? And same that load sub TLB has two form, like in an aggregated form or for the measurement period, or it could be a raw load measurement sub TLB. Number of packets bytes to the specific app server where this kind of services are hosted. So the compute engine kind of working in conjunction with the BGP, that will have a interpretations of this different sub TLBs. The BGP will feed that compute engine, and they kind of do that computations and determine that what would be the cost factor for the different next stops associated with this Anycast route, and accordingly that will change the decision in the forwarding. So that's pretty much on this other sub TLBs. The next slide. Yeah, so we have introduced a new path attribute, optional transitive BGP path attribute to carry all the its services metadata. This metadata applicable to multiple NLRIs type. So why this new metadata type? We felt it would be much easier for implementation wise, not to mixing up with the existing kind of a path attribute. And this metadata again applicable to different types of NLRIs, like what we want to propagate to the ingress. So currently the three sub TLBs are captured, but like it can any number of sub TLBs. If in future we can think other sub TLBs that can be included part of this metadata type. Next slide. So that's pretty much. Currently it's in the work group adoptions, and means this routing based solutions to bring the ingress to take a proper decisions on the load balancing the traffic in the different ECMP nodes. We felt it would be huge beneficials, like a kind of sending the appropriate traffic to that different data centers. Would be very useful, and especially based on the Anycast address. So we kind of received a good feedback, and we want to kind of capture more comments. And if you have any feedback, suggestions, let us know. And we are looking to move forward. Thank you.
Draft is in working group adoption. I mentioned earlier the specific adoption issues that people are concerned with is it's linked to the CAN buff, but maybe that obscured some other questions or concerns you have about the draft. Now would be a good time to ask questions. So I'll pause and see if you want to ask Cossack or Linda any questions. AC, do you want to go ahead? Yep.
since this is a transitive attribute, wouldn't there be problems if you have a bunch of hops in between the routers that actually that actually understand the attribute? You could have routing loops if they don't all understand it. If they're
We are
using
talking
different criteria for path selection.
Yeah, so the two parts like AC. So one is kind of the BGP updates. Another is the basically the traffic forwarding. So the BGP updates basically it's more of a point to point from the egress to the ingress. Like it's a transitive attribute. It will be going to the RR, and RR would be reflecting based on the routing policy to the ingress node. So in between nodes, anything they don't have to kind of it's not meant for them. Like and they just pass it to that kind of go to the RR, and they don't need to be kind of BGP nodes even like so BGP updates wise, it's more of a delivering through route reflector, or could be point to point, and the when the traffic comes, then it's again it is encapsulated properly to that specific egress tunnels, like where we have a multipathing. It would be kind of any kind of tunneling encapsulations could be used for the specific destinations. Like
Just one more point.
An encapsulate. This assumes a tunnel capsulation, right?
No, as AC, just want one more point. So this is IBGP is like both sides are within one domain. It's not for eBGP. Just add that. It's one domain.
Right, but you could have different. You could have even in IBGP, if it's a transitive attribute, you could have some routers that didn't have software that supported it. That would be a problem. I mean,
we don't need, right?
Is it up to the administrator to do that?
Yeah, so you see, we don't need that other middle routers to kind of understands that attributes, right? It is made for the ingress specific nodes. It will be just point to point kind of a delivery through RR.
Kosik, you're missing his point. He's asked, what about incomplete coverage of this attribute within your single AS? You might want to address. Lacey, did I understand your point?
Yeah, I'm saying if it only goes to the ingress and they're using it for path selection, and if they forward it to a router that is to the data center, it's an anycast address. So there's multiple paths. So you could actually, if they don't all understand it and it's not tunneled, you could actually have a route loop. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah. So in the deployment in this local data network, the packet between ingress and egress will be encapsulated in a tunnel. Yeah, but the path attribute will not attach to the tunnel because we think this matrix apply to different type of tunnels.
That AC, I will follow up on this incomplete coverage with the authors. Did you get the answer you wanted?
Yeah. As long as it's tunneled, it'll work. I mean, tunneled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tunnel BGP.
I mean, it's tunneled because then you can send the anycast on the path you select. Whereas if it's just
I think AC is concerned on the routing loop. Yeah, like if other parties get it, like yeah, as long as it's tunneled and properly send it to the destination, this will be okay. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna pick up Srihari. Go ahead, Srihari.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay. Possibly a follow-on question to what AC was asking. So there is no best path change when the ingress router receives these additional information?
No.
And therefore,
because, okay.
So therefore, you just need to play with how the forwarding is done for each of these paths based on the capacity, and you set up the tunnel accordingly. So, okay, that answers what AC was asking. Okay, all right, that clarifies my question as well. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? We do have interest in this draft, so I want to make sure we've gone through any concerns. Okay, then I'm going to ask one more time because sometimes I rush through things. Like this morning's missing the note well. Okay.
Thank you all.
Then we thank you. Our next slide should be the car CT stuff. Just a minute, man. I think I'm up on that one. Okay. So, thank you all for your patience this morning. This is going to go through some catch up on where we were at IETF-114, what we've seen in the last month. I've read through in detail all the Forum 3 changes to see if there's any high-level changes. I will put forward a final Forum 3 draft once I get through reviewing it with the authors. So remember that our call had 3 parts. Part 1 is the customer intent, that it needed to be SLA and service level expectations needed to be interoperable, and it needed to be scalable. A lot of Forum 3's discussions discussed the scalability and the mechanisms. So I will go into some of that. We didn't really talk about interoperability. Jeff has released a private draft has IDR BGP Differact .00, and he will be going through this. We also have a draft discussing SRv6 prefixes or colorful prefixes. The interesting thing about part 3 is there's a lot of detail, and I'm so grateful to each of you who participated. I'm gonna scrub it through with the authors, and then I will send it out, and I would appreciate additional feedback. What I'm going to do is simply try to unweave all the wonderful back and forth conversation into a single document you can look at, and then we're going to upload the issues into the data tracker. These documents have been accepted as experimental. This document, draft Colorage IDR classifiable transport planes, we will make it simple by changing that to CT. -01. I'm working with the authors. They've graciously accepted the IDR chair's request to have 2 editors. So we appreciate that. Why are we going to experimental? We are convinced from the customers that the technology is needed in the field. There is interoperability issues, and Jeff is going through that because we felt that was important, and we need to turn it into RFC quality. But we still feel, as we did originally, that the drafts are functionally the same and that we should be able to get to some interoperability, but we were convinced by the customers. We need to turn experimental in the long term to proposed standard, revise the drafts from customer feedback, IETF discussions, and create an interoperability draft. Notice the IDR chairs are moving in parallel. Each of the proposals has to have 2 implementations, and talking with the authors, Those are in process and in early test. Some in different ways. Some portions of it, in some cases, some more complete solutions in others. And I haven't sanitized sharing that information, the specifics of that information from the authors, so I'm just going to give you that light hand waving. So when I looked at the forum and did a deep dive in the last week or so, I found that the IETF list of topics was accurate with 2 additions. So I'm going to go through that. We're going to discuss it a little bit. And we had the spring problem statement come out. We sort of hinted that it was out at IETF and didn't really give it play. I will give out some additional comments on that on the list. I'm mentioning that the draft is draft HR Spring Intent Routing Aware Color. And DJ, have I gotten the right draft for that?
Yes, that one is right.
That is correct. Thank you so much. So I'm going to review CAR and CT. I'm going to review the next steps they presented. If you want to stop at that point and ask any questions, because we went pretty quickly through the IDR meeting in IETF 114. And then we'll dash on to the new draft, CPR colorful prefix routing for SRv6, and we will go into Jeff's discussion on interoperability. Now, let me go through. You will see in red what I've sort of gleaned. Thanks to the authors, their discussion at IETF 1114 was pretty complete with all the Forum 3. There's some more detail, but the basic information we garnered by IETF 114 is the same. Both of them have to work on their description of packing PDUs. They both need to make sure they're compatible with new LRIs. That issue was raised by Shuan. They have key fields that they need to carefully describe. What happens if you add new LRIs, how this might grow. That was part of the discussion. And then there was some real concern for the support for SRv6 and robustness in general and operations. So one of the things that came up is there was a specific thread on SRPCE, colorful locators. As we listen to the next draft, some of those issues might want to be looked at. Then we had intent at a service level, we had scaling and scalable replacement for LU. Now this has quite a bit of play on the Forum 3 list when I looked in detail. I will need to scrub this part and send you out a specific recommendation based on talking to both authors. And the recommendation may be different for each author set, meaning I need a recommendation for improving the draft. At this point, we're looking at improving both drafts. These are now both working group drafts. We're trying to make them the best possible drafts we can. There is an intent at the service level that I think needs a little bit more pulling out and making sure we have a clean logic line between this is what the discussion of intent all the way forward and how it transitions from the BGP LU and becomes a scalable follow-on. There is the use of add path, which seems to have some general discussion, but again, the discussion on Forum 3 pointed out that that was not as clean as it could be. Now, as we go on from that, the things below the line are things that each draft pointed out that the discussions pointed out the authors could improve the text. For car, there was some suggestions for the Anycast scenario, the color mapping resolution, LCM and color communities, the non-agreeing color. Now we need to, and the APN prediction for color domains. We need to, in our discussions there, I need to determine for each of these issues a summary of the issue and a summary of the things that have to be resolved. These summaries of what have to be resolved for car, and I'll give you the same example in CT in a moment, will be put into issues in the GitHub. We've opened a GitHub for both drafts. So the authors can both field issues and then be able to provide changes in the drafts that might be commented on. You can, the authors, the main editors, that's why there are two main editors, are in charge of the GitHub repository and changes. They're in charge of resolving the issues once we put them in. I'm hoping we'll get to agreement on issues. Again, I hope it is my being behind on this that we don't have the issues all the way for the car and CT. The authors have been very responsive. Now, so what our plan is that these will go to, I will write a summary with the issues and the things that need to be resolved based on this discussion, and then we will put the details, and then the car and CT editors will handle this as quickly as they wish to. We hope that it will move fast. The CT issues that are specific to CT are discussions again of the CT scenario handling, the SAFI 76 use in only option 6, the embedded MPLS label, the discussion on whether the MPLS label for in RFC 8277 is appropriate or not, seems to have opinions both sides. The real question is, we need to go further because there seems to be in the Form 3 a comparison where we're looking to try to see what's missing in the CT draft and then have a working group discussion. If it's beyond a revision of the draft, we'll pull some of these issues out into a general discussion. The use of multiple RTs with non-agreeing color domains, multipath local repair, and churn suppression, and support for multiple encapsulations. So, folks, I'm going to pause there because I am simply giving the list that both authors and I agreed with just a few comments. Perhaps you would like to ask questions. I am seeing Swadesh in the chat room. I am seeing Kaliraj and Swadesh, and I'm seeing both editor teams. I am seeing DJ and Swadesh. I am seeing Kaliraj and Nats. So I will pause here because at ITF 114, we didn't have much time for discussion, and let the queue open to ask the authors about any of their draft. We're at the stage we're no longer comparing for adoption, but we're comparing to improve the drafts. At this point, I'll open the queue for a moment. Authors about any of these issues if you have questions. Okay, we'll come back at the end if there are additional questions. Boy, I thought at this point there'd be people rushing to the mic.
So, Sue, this is Kaliraj. I just want to confirm. So basically the issues that you have listed here, most of them are already discussed or explained in the mailing list. So here we just listing it for completeness, and maybe you will be opening the GitHub issues for the unresolved ones, which have not made into the draft yet. Is that right?
Right, and that is correct. And you, all four, Kaliraj, you Kaliraj, Nets, Swadesh, and DJ and I have to come to a authors group discussion on whether these issues are closed. This was to make sure that if anybody knows of any other issues, that they either mention them now or mention them to the mail list or send them to me as the chair that's sitting as the shepherd.
Okay, got it.
Okay, Jeff, please go ahead.
Thanks, Sue. So just to add on to what you're saying, the motivation is basically to try to use the issue tracker to make sure that we don't lose any of the issues that we resolved over the last 6 months of discussion. So we'll be reviewing the archives and making sure that issues get opened against the things. And much like any bug process, it may be possible that we reopen an issue and then decide it's actually in the text. So don't get overworked up if we add a issue and something is actually resolved. A recommendation that Alvaro has made is that we may want to set up some email list in IETF space to allow people to subscribe to the GitHub issues tracker without actually needing native GitHub accounts. So I will be looking into that after the interim.
Alvaro, thank you for giving us that. That'll make things easier for folks. Let me give you some of the background. I've, like I did with the discussion part 1 and 2, I wrote up a detailed set of notes for myself. And if Forum 1 and 2 were interesting, Forum 3 had tremendous amount of wonderful input. I need to spend some time scrubbing this, but my day job had had a little impact, folks. So I won't go any further right now on letting go of my detailed design or giving the details on any of these because I haven't reviewed them with the editor teams, both CAR and CT. So, but these will be the beginnings of that. I haven't seen where the high level issues have changed at all. The details will be there. Once we get the document finished, I will post a PDF of the details, just like I did with questions 1 and 2 on the IDR wiki. Will probably put pieces of it also in the GitHub if it's appropriate. Any questions? DJ, did I miss anything?
Nothing from my side. So let's okay.
Nothing from your side? Okay, you're a little mute, you're a little soft to me. Okay. And again, I really appreciate the author's hard work. There's just so much. I've reordered and I will set up times with the authors. It's taken me a lot longer than I thought it would to go through all the details and sort them and try to find the issues. And I'm not sure I'm even happy with it. And that's just because there's a lot of good work. Okay, so just to review, this is what DJ presented at ITF 114, the things that the working group can help with, review and feedback for current version, updates on SRv6 flows, consideration, updates on filtering, and inputs on use case scenarios. If DJ and Swadesh are the key editors, DJ, is there anything else you'd like to add to this list?
Not at this time. So thanks.
Okay, you felt it was complete 4 weeks ago, and that's good to know that we captured everything at ITF. Kaliraj, is this list still valid?
So I think it stands good.
It's still good?
Yep.
Good. Okay, the reason we wanted to show this is that notice that the text clarification SRv6 is a concern for a set of operators. The RD usage in section 8 clarifying. There are some other places where in the discussion forum, people have suggested there needs to be updates, and the some of the authors have agreed. But so this for both CAR and CT may expand. Again, that will be the basis of it. Now, the CAR and CT document, this is the text we said it needed to handle a larger discussion. What's it for? Color, impact, error, filtering. Jeff is started with interoperability procedures. So that's all the expectation. If you feel some of these things aren't there, pick it up and send it to the list, send it to the chairs. We're moving at this very carefully, step by step. We're moving into GitHub simply so we have an issues tracker that's common and open. Because what I found after going through the list, we sort of really did need to have an issues tracker to get this through quickly. Other working groups have found that to be successful. The rest of the slides in my slide deck, if you download it, are the other slides from CAR CT in case when we get in our discussion that we have slides that are available. So that's the end of my presentation. And we're going to go to the next presentation unless there are questions. Is there any problem with the process that the chairs are going through for this particular revision of documents? Hypo, are you, is Hypo presenting this morning? Ah, wonderful.
Okay, hello.
Good to have you, hear you this morning, Hypo.
Okay, now this is Hypo from Huawei.
Hypo, yes, Hypo from Huawei, yes.
Now let me introduce our solution about the BGP colorful prefix routing for SRv6 based services. Next, please. This is the background. Now, for the user, there is a trend of using one common network for multiple types of services, and the service requirements are usually considered as intent and represented with color. For services which span multiple network domains, different end-to-end passes need to be established to meet the service intent. For MPLS network, we may usually use BGP-LU to build an end-to-end LSP. But for IPv6 and SRv6 network, global IPv6 reachability can be used for end-to-end paths. That means SRv6 best effort. This document introduced the colorful prefix routing mechanism to provide end-to-end intent-aware paths for SRv6, because now SRv6 best effort is usually only for end-to-end, but with no intent. Next, please. This is a basic mechanism about SRv6 service seed and colorful locator prefix. For SRv6, the seed consists of locator, function, and optional argument. This SRv6 service seed are routable according to its locator prefix. In this case, we may split different SRv6 locators for different intent. The locators are we call it as colorful locators. It's a split from the basic locator. The SRv6 service seed with specific intent are allocated using the corresponding colorful locators and as the covering prefix. For example, the yellow one, colorful locator 1, maybe means low latency. The blue one, colorful locator 2, maybe means high bandwidth. Next, please. One IPv6 colorful prefix are advertised as BGP IPv6 unicast routes. Safi and Safi means true and one, because it's also a IPv6 routing, IPv6 route. But for this route, the color extend community color EC should be carried in the route. It will describe the intent for this IPv6 route. On the domain border nodes, the color EC may be changed to the color in the local domain, and the next hop will be set to self. It's similar like to BPLU. SRv6 service routes and are advertised using the mechanism defined in IFC 9252. For inter-AS option C is used, so the net hop for the SRv6 service route is kept changed. Since the intent of the service is embedded in the SRv6 service seed, color EC is not needed in the SRv6 service route because the color is described in the built-in seed. Next, please. This is the procedure about the path resolution. When a node receives a colorful prefix route, it should resolve it into an intra-domain color-aware path based on the tuple of NC, N in the next hop, and C is the color. The intra-domain color-aware path can be one of the following types, maybe SRv6 policy, SRMPLS policy, RCBTE, and other tunnel types. Each tunnel can let the SRv6 route, the IPv6 route to the net hop is okay. Next, please. For the service route, the SRv6 service seed carried in the SRv6 service route is used for route iteration. The SRv6 service seed matches to a CPR route based on IP longest matching lookup. The intra-domain intent-aware path, which the CPR route is resolved to, is used to encapsulate and forward the SRv6 service traffic. Next, please. This is an example. When the P3 will advertise the routes to P1 and across 3 AS, the PE will assign the seed for different services, such here shows the VPN 1 to VPN 5. VPN 1 to 3 may use the yellow one colored locator 1, and the VPN 4 and 5 maybe use the blue colored locator 2. Then CPR routes this is then here there may be two CPR colored locator prefix, means the color locator 1 and color locator 2. These two rows will advertised and also will installed in the FIB. The route will advertise to ASBR 31 with the color C3 with the color C31, and this also will advertise to ASBR 23 and send net hop to the ASBR 3 to 1, and also it may cap the color with the color 331. SBR 23 may advertise the IPv6 route to SBR 21. In this domain, it may change the color to C21. Here it may be low latency in this domain. And also this SBR 21 also advertise it to SBR 11. Maybe can capture the color EC to C21. But in ASBR 11, it may be advertised the color EC, the IPv6 route to P1, but change the color EC to C11 because in S1 C11 maybe means the intent of low latency. For P1 it will first install the C locator 1. The C colored locator 1 its net hop is SBR 11 and its color is C11. Then it uses this net hop and this color maybe to use this couple to resolve the tunnel from P1 to SBR 11. The tunnel may be a low latency tunnel. Then the service route from P3 advertised to P1 will capture the net hop is P3, but also it will advertise the routes with VPN seed, means VPN 1 seed. The seed is corresponding to the colored locator 1. At the P1, the service route will use the VPN 1 seed to do route resolve, and maybe then here it will matching to the colored locator 1 because the VPN 1 seed is maybe longest match to the color locator 1. So for the service route, it's similar like the SRv6 best effort, but it's corresponding. The colored locator 1 maybe also steering to a local inter-domain tunnel to P1 to SBR 11. So now the packet forwarding from P1 to P3 is desk address is the VPN 1 seed, but this seed maybe also may also resolve to an inter-domain path to SBR 11. And also when the packet arrives at SBR 11, the inter-domain tunnel may be reduced, but and let the original desk address is also VPN 1 seed. Now it's also here. It also maybe look up the FIB, maybe matching the C color locator 1, and also use its tunnel. It's a tunnel path to arrive forwarding to the SBR 21, and all like this is, and then the packet will finally arrive at the P3. In this solution, the type of inter-domain path maybe can SRv6, SRMPLS, or SCPT and others. Next, please. This is the benefits of the colored prefix routing. For this, because we are basically based on the existing BGP mechanism, no new protocol extension is needed. We use only the IPv6 unicast route and the original color extend community, and this is backward compatible. Is very easy to deploy increment in network domains, which we don't support color prefix routing, but based on IP prefix longest match, SRv6 service are also steering to inter-domain best effort path. and also we may support different types of intra-domain color-aware paths. SRv6 is only required on the PE node. So for the interim one, MPLS or SRv6 and SRv6 and other tunnel is okay, and it's more efficient data plan encapsulation. For MPLS data plan, the BPLU label is also no for I'm sorry, for MPLS data plan, it may be also encap the MPLS other MPLS labels, but no need to use the BPLU. But for SRv6 data plan, we may reduce the overhead of additional IPv6 header, so the packet may be very light. Next, please. Next step, we are welcome comments and feedbacks, and also we are progress this document as a lightweight inter-domain intent-based routing mechanism for SRv6 service. And also some of the design may be integrated with other intent-based routing mechanism for better support for SRv6 based service and efficient data plan encapsulation. That's all. Thank you.
The new presentation, so we're going to pause here and take questions.
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
This is Kaliraj here. Yeah, so I would say this is like you can generalize this as, so there are two ways of advertising the different intents from the egress PE. Either you use different loopbacks where each loopback pertains to a color, or you use the same loopback and then use the color community. That's a combination, the color comma endpoint. So in this case, because on the service layer, we use multiple endpoints and each endpoint pertains to a color. And in the transport layer, what you're doing here is avoiding the need of a new SAFI. And that can be done. I would like to point out that that can be done not only for SRv6, but also for LU with multiple loopbacks, or with GRE tunnels with multiple loopbacks, or with UDP tunnels. So in those cases, you will have like MPLS over UDP or MPLS over GRE kind of scenarios. Here it is like a collapsed tunnel where the SRv6 SID is pointing to the VRF itself. You don't have a separate tunnel terminating at the egress PE and another SID for the VRF. So it's a generic solution which can apply to non-SRv6 cases also, but what it requires is multiple endpoints at the egress PE. And that is what the CT family kind of avoids. But another thing it turns out to me is like, though this approach does not use the SAFI 76, but it uses the other mechanisms that is prescribed by the CT draft, like the resolution scheme and resolution that happens at each of the ingress nodes. That can be a border node or the ingress. And you also resolve over SRv6 over MPLS data plane, RSVP. So those seem like special case of the CT architecture to me. So those were the observations I had on this proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Kalaji. I'm sorry, I'm not catching all of you, but in our solution, I think our solution is only use for SRv6 only, because we use SRv6 advantage, and also in our solution, the encapsulation encapsulation may be light than other method. And the other we may later check up. We may later communicate at the email. Okay.
Wait, but when you say you're going to go to when you say you're going to set discussion on the email, are you going to, did you want to raise something specifically with Kaliraj, or did you want to explain more about your draft? I wasn't clear there.
Okay.
Since the well, I'll send some questions to you via email. It may be difficult to hear. I think that's what you're saying. Kaliraj, if you have your questions, you could send them to the list or the comments to the list so Weibo could pick them up. I may move all of that to a separate thread. I'm being very careful to try to track all comments related to car CT and color technology. So if you want to raise your question on this, Kaliraj, Weibo may be able to answer it even later or bring it back in the presentation. There's also the chat room if you wish.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send the observations to by email. I was just saying that it works for other NCAP technologies also.
Good. If you had questions for Weibo or suggestions, that would be good as well. And we will probably start a mail thread on this discussion as well, folks. The chairs are based on the working group's feedback, trying to very much help or nurture this. Hopefully it's nurture for all of you. Are there more questions?
About SRv6. So before this proposal made in this draft, does SRv6 resolve over MPLS tunnels? Or does SRv6 resolve over SRv6 tunnels only? Anybody on the list knows?
We are for SRv6 only.
No, SRv6, you said it resolves over RSVPT or other MPLS tunnels also, right? So I want to ask the SRv6 experts, if any on the list, whether that's true already, or is it a new proposal being made here?
G is going to answer you. Go ahead.
SRv6 MPLS interworking solution, which does allow the SRv6 underlay to be resolved over MPLS tunnels. Yes, you can read that draft.
Thank you. G, do you want to go first? I would recommend Kaliraj. Swadesh, please send the draft that you mentioned to the list or to Kaliraj directly. List is probably better, and we'll pick that up. G-Dog, would you like to make?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just want to reply to Kaliraj's comment. With this solution, SRv6 is only required for the service layer, which is we need SRv6 capable PEs at the two endpoints. For the transit domain tunnels, you can use SRv6 or other MPLS-based tunnels, like SR-MPLS or the RSVPT-based tunnels. All this can be supported as a transport layer.
Initial transport layer setup that you're using with IPv6 unicast family. Basically, the IPv6 unicast family is overloaded to carry the transport prefixes, which are the SIDs. So that is like doing an SRv6 resolution over SRT on the border nodes as well.
Yeah, for the transport layer, the IPv6 unicast route will be used to cross the domains, and the transit nodes does not need to treat it as a SRv6 seed, just like an IPv6 prefix, and resolve it over intra-domain color path. Yeah, that is the. So we think this does not require the transit domains to support SRv6.
Okay, so there is no SRv6 said on that IPv6 unicast route itself. It's just a plain IPv6 route.
Right.
Yeah. So okay, yeah. Then it's like basically similar to IP tunnels or UDP tunnels.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to go directly to the next presentation, which is Jeff's. Jeff, do you want to control your own slides? I think you can just click on the pre-shared ones.
Yeah, I can drive it if you like. 1 second.
It's up to you. I'm glad to drive it for you.
I will.
You've done it so many times for me.
I'm attempting to share preload. All the slots taken, so somebody needs to stop sharing.
I need to stop sharing. It's your turn.
Okay, let's try that again.
There you go. It's good. You're on top now.
Okay, thanks, Sue. So this presentation is some initial thinking about what we can do for interop procedures for BGP CAR and CT. I got to spend time working on this at IETF because I was one of the people that came a little bit too close to one of the COVID exposures, managed to not get infected at the conference itself, and then got nailed during trying to get home. So I had a lot of time to think about things in my hotel room. Just for context, the original draft that I had started writing was to start differentiating the different routing and color technologies, and the diffract name partially came out of that, but it's also a play on words that diffraction is the technology used with a prism to separate colors. So it has no deeper meaning than that. So what am I going to be talking about today? The thing that's not actually mentioned on the slide is this is not at this current point in time, a request for working group adoption. This is just some thinking, and if the procedures are helpful, the working group can choose to adopt it or potentially take a completely different tack. We're very early in this process, so please spend some time thinking about this yourselves. What I will be talking about in here is what sort of interop can we do? Well, I'll be talking about forwarding behaviors to some extent. The thing I will not be talking about is the CT SRv6 procedures. I do mention it partially in the draft. The CT authors have indicated that they're not happy with how some of the RFC behaviors for SRv6 work, and they're looking to see if they want to change their proposal. I'm going to be talking about mapping of NLRI keys, because that's really the interesting thing that as we've sort of gone through 6 months worth of discussion about CAR and CT, this is the part that is where all the interesting headaches are present on, and how those NLRI keys interact with where the color is inside the route. What I'm not going to be covering is filtering. The CAR procedures still list as TBD, and CT is just basically RT constrain versus the transport class. Also not covering VPN CAR because CT doesn't really talk about it, and you have to decide if that's the interop scenario or it's something that can be shipped in the night. So I'll spend exactly one slide talking about the forwarding behaviors. The draft actually has a lot of comments about how stuff actually gets remapped from one to another. And basically the core observations that both documents talk about 3 basic forwarding behaviors: standard LU style label stacks, SR style label index, and SRv6. Now CT basically says, we're going to use the core RFC behaviors for these things, just like LU does. CAR mostly operates in its draft discussing that here are the same features, here's how the encoding gets carried on them, and their local optimizations to try to do better packing, and they get carried along in the non-key portion of the NLRIs. These things end up very cleanly mapping at the moment when you consider just those 3 scenarios, and the details are in the draft, so I won't be talking about them further in this presentation. one thing that's worth mentioning is there's open commentary on the CAR document about what happens if you have unusual mixes of the different optional NRI transport types, and the authors admitted that some of the clarifications may be useful there. So for each of the proposals, we have a NLRI key that's related to how BGP treats it for announcement and route comparison purposes. In CAR, the NLRI is the IP prefix for the endpoint and a color that's 32 bits. And in CT, the NLRI key is a route distinguisher, standard L3 VPN style route distinguisher, and an IP prefix endpoint. Nothing terribly exciting. Spent lots of time talking about this. And similarly, we've also talked about over the last several months, where the colors live in these things. And in BGP CAR, the NLRI starts off in the NLRI key, and that one gets carried end to end as part of route propagation, and it's considered the original intent. But part of the procedures for CAR, has been discussed over the last many months, is that if we cross from one color domain to another, a local color mapping extended community may be using. And what this means is that the effective color, the one that's actually used for the route resolution purposes, for the endpoint for a given color, moves around. If without an LCM, it's an NLRI key, and if it's LCM, it's from there. With BGP CT, it's consistently what the transport class extended community contains. So, sort of kicking off this effort, we have to sort of ask ourselves, what does interoperability mean? For a given BGP route, and normally when we talk about BGP in a 4271 RFC sense, a route is a prefix that's carried in NLRI paired with a set of path attributes. We think about sort of what the subtleties mean for routes with colors. We sort of continue these discussions. It's basically an endpoint with a color for a specific set of forwarding behavior with a set of otherwise uncoupled path attributes from those things. And for a given protocol, a given native version of this, whichever side you're looking at, can we create native state from foreign protocol state? And if we do so, can we actually have consistent route selection and pass them around? Well, the answer appears to be yes. Foreign protocols can be mapped into the native protocol. And a thing to think about in terms of how these routes get passed around is that receiving a foreign BGP route, and turning it into locally a native route or vice versa is effectively the same type of polymorph operation that we see with our VPN technologies, where maybe as an example we receive a standard FE1, SAFE1, IPv4 unicast route in the CE context, and it gets turned into an L3 VPN unicast route in the BGP PE core. So the routes get created pairwise, and they share fate. So what needs to be mapped? So each protocol has a flavor of an original intent, and so a lot of our discussions talked about over the last several months, these things are effectively a operational context. That operational context, with BGP CAR, color is the original intent. That's what they want to carry end to end and make visible. And certainly, if you go from one color domain to another, the effective color may move around, but the original intent is still the color that's in the NLRI. And very similarly for CT, well, it doesn't really have quite the same original intent, color-wise, as CAR does. That's not the construct the CT authors have chosen to use. They're using information that can be encoded in a route distinguisher, which gives you a sense of origin of the route, and that's the piece that's carried across BGP through the protocol. So putting it sort of a different way, it's the NLRI keys are what we're talking about. The intent effectively is what we have as the native thing for the NLRI key, and it's what we do route selection on and how we propagate things on a hop-by-hop basis. So I'm not going to actually go into deep details of this interop topology. There is a mapping set of examples in the appendices, for the draft. definitely encourage to take a look at that. I just want to make sure that we conveyed the high-level details today. But an easy example is what happens if you have a series of domains that are adjacent to each other, or potentially even tied into each other. So routes that pass from CT1 to CAR1 to CT2 to CAR2. Well, CT1 also has a direct connection to CT2. This is an example of that your feature, your mapping mechanisms are working, because within the receiving domain, if you have paths from a native and you have paths through a foreign one, you're expecting that the procedures will operate exactly the same as if there was no alien technology in the middle. Where can mapping happen? Well, you can have it done as part of your send procedures, or you can do it on your receive procedures. It works the same both ways. So as we start working through this sort of thing, nomenclature becomes where these things get tricky. The nomenclature I've started with is that if you have a CAR route that carries a CT route, it is a CAR mapped CT route, and vice versa. So what bit of machinery looks like it can be usable for this sort of thing? And there are three specific constructs that I've come up with through this initial pass. The first one is in a CT context. CT carries a route distinguisher as part of its format. A route distinguisher has enough space in it to actually carry a 32-bit color. So a new route distinguisher is defined. There's a space for 65,000 of them. There have been 3 defined for many, many years. So there's plenty of space for new ones. A new one is defined that carries a color intent. 2 extended communities are defined. They carry components for the classful transport. When you're actually passing stuff around into from CT into CAR. One is to actually encode the classful transport's original RD that's present in the route. So that's basically the tunnel for the RD in CAR. And CT doesn't really have a color-wise original intent like CAR does. It's allowed the transform on a hop-by-hop basis, but when you have domains of CAR that may be disconnected and are bridging one or more CT domains, it's important that when the route enters a CT domain, enters a CAR domain and exits, that within the CAR domain it maintains a consistent NLRI key for the end-to-end process. So we end up with a original intent in terms of the color that was carried with the CT route the first time it's transformed, and every time it crosses into a CAR domain, that's the one that keeps. So core observation here, this is the state that needs to be used for doing the interop, especially the extended communities. That's one option. It could be used in a different format. It could go into a new path attribute, sort of like the adder set for the tunneling of IBGP attributes for VPNs. Is this machinery complex? Well, probably not. This is a small set of transformation stuff that is going to be run by the software and not an operator. So these things are not expected to be part of as policy, although realistically you could probably implement that as an initial hack if you felt like doing so. So the next several slides cover the sort of boring details of the transforms. Again, I urge you to take a look at the contents of the draft. So if we have a CT route and we're trying to actually carry it into CAR, so CAR is the native protocol, CT is the forward one. If we don't have that original intent extended community, then we're going to add one. But if we had one, we keep it. Again, the idea is that within a CAR domain, we're going to keep a consistent NLRI key of the endpoint, plus that original color, which happens to be coming from CT's first time it's encapsulated in the CAR domain. The classical transport's original RD community is set from the CT routes RD, and the NLRI color is set to the transport class color. And the CAR NLRI endpoint just gets copied, and that's going to be true of each of these proposals. The endpoint's the boring detail, and it just stays there. And then in each one of these procedures, you clean up the communities that are not relevant to the proposal in question. So in this case, we get rid of the transport class inside of our car route. And mapping is very similar, goes the other direction. CT routes RD is set to the one that was titled from the original RD. The transport class is set to the car route's effective color. This is a detail that was off in the internet draft. I realize this is making the slides. This is because within a car context, obviously routes can be passed around and passed potentially from one color domain to another, and we CT is going to want to actually know what that effective color is. And the original intent is just simply preserved. The only reason for it is that if the route, having now become CT again, passes into another car domain, we'll end up with the same car NLRI, for this route, end to end. Very similarly, for mapping car routes into a CT context, there's actually a little bit less to do on the encoding side of things. The CT route's route distinguisher gets created into this new RD color mechanism we were discussing, and that preserves the original intent. And the transport class just gets set to the route's effective color. And then we clean up the LCM if that happened to have been present as part of the car route. And very similarly, the unmapping procedure, very simply, is that if we have a car route and we have a mapped route, the car's NLRI is set from the RD color that has been carried around. The color value in the RD color is different than the transport color on the CT route that we're unmapping. Well, then we need to actually have an LCM added. And then we get rid of the CT route's transport color. So the core purpose for these procedures is to make sure that anytime we've gone from one domain to another, potentially multiple times, again, picture the simple line topology. Well, the line topology is very boring. The transforms are somewhat obvious. But if you have connections between those lines where you receive the native routes end to end along with the mapped routes being transformed, we need to make sure that the routes maintain a consistent NLRI form for whatever is native for that specific BGP router. If that's done, then we're going to end up for that native router some sense of what we're picking as the specific encoding that is native for the domain, and this is where all of our route selection is going to get done. You can run our best path there, and just like each of the proposals talk about, both of them effectively construct the same route resolution state. You have an endpoint that that's resolving for a color, and you just simply do that for your individual proposal. And of course, once you actually have your best path, this means that for your foreign connections, the best route needs to still be disseminated. The details for that are intentionally not described because how that looks in a specific implementation will probably vary considerably depending on how your route injection works. But again, the semantic is somewhat similar to what happens when you have VPN routes. You have one route that shares fate with another one, and it can cause a redistribution as part of that transform process. So one of the things that this exercise was also useful for working through is, the transform procedures for doing the mappings are fairly straightforward, and we end up with some level of consistency. How close are we to a solution that's basically a single merged solution? And clearly these observations hold based on current observations, but if other details develop that show that the procedures can't handle things, well, maybe this is not quite as close to being a single solution as we were hoping. But set of observations are that once you have an RD color route distinguisher format to be able to carry original intents as color, well, this means that you can use an RD. This means that even in sort of car format, instead of endpoint and color, endpoint plus RD, it just simply changes your operational idea of what a NLRI key looks like in a car-like context, or even a CT-like context. The real question is, where is your color? Well, this means that if you have an RD color style, route distinguisher. If the effective color is the same as the one that's inside that RD, effectively what CAR currently does, you don't need an extended community. CAR, when it's doing its remapping from one domain to another, uses LCM, and the transport class potentially becomes optional in that circumstance as well. So the real differentiator, if we go with a somewhat combined RD endpoint for both proposals, is what do we do about the forwarding behavior encodings? So this is a set of observations. CT has the issue that the mandatory labels inappropriate for SRv6. That's a valid criticism that we've seen, especially in SUSE issue 3. We know that CAR optional NLRIs, the intent of the authors is to try to allow for better packing. One of the discussion points that has come up in this discussion is that our BGP error handling RFC 7606 wisdom tells us that we want NLRIs as boring as possible, and there's some historical benefit for trying to do this. And what do we do about that? And we certainly know that per NLRI information is helpful for packing. The thing is, we also know that it doesn't universally apply. Some things just simply won't pack for NLRI reasons, much less other path attribute reasons. So maybe the interesting questions long term is, what do we want to do in terms of this type of encoding? This was one of the, I believe, intents of the CAR authors as part of making this proposal. Is maybe this is a good generic way for us to carry these sorts of forwarding behaviors forward. The CT authors have a multi-next hop attribute that is part of their discussion point, covering this space as well. And there has actually been presentations over the years about maybe it's time to update the BGP update format itself. We've been living with a set of path attributes with a number of NLRI inside of it for years. Maybe it's time to further subdivide it into something that potentially can carry per NLRI type state without necessarily having the NLRI itself be in TLV format. One possible example of such an encoding is there's a draft in BMP for carrying TLVs, and they do this for exactly the same sort of reason that the CAR proposal has, at least as part of what I consider its perceived intent of having better packing. You don't want to disturb the actual message format in the BMP stuff, but annotations per NLRI is still a useful thing. And this is a way that they have figured out how to preserve basically an encapsulated BGP update and allow for BMP specific notations. Maybe this is a way for us to be able to handle something very similar. So this is where I move to questions, and I do see that there is stuff in chat. So let me proceed with Aijun. I'll just go ahead and read the questions for the minutes and also try to respond to them. So Aijun asks, for the mapping nomenclature, should the CAR map CT route, when the BGP routes carry tar, be changed to CT map CAR route? Certainly, I have no strong opinions about the ordering on some of these things. English topic comment type syntax makes it a tricky sort of thing, and certainly I'm willing to consider whatever is necessary. Again, this is some initial thinking. It's not the formal proposal at this point in time, and perhaps people have a different way they'd like to look at it. So certainly, Aijun, we can take a look at maybe changing the syntax of this a little bit. Robert asks, does this only work between domains? So what if we have one domain, 500 routes which only speak BGP CAR, and 500 routers which speak only BGP CT? So as I made sort of casual mention inside the slide that discusses the sample topology, it's my belief that this works perfectly fine in a single domain, single AS. Potentially crossed route reflector boundaries as an example, where some of the devices speak CT, some of them speak CAR. I believe that the route mapping procedures cleanly accommodate things, and I agree with you, Robert. This is probably the one scenario that maybe has some tricky semantics to it, and it's going to probably take a little bit more failure analysis to see if there's any edge cases that I hadn't accounted for. But yeah, my sort of core observation is that once remapping is done, route selection can happen consistently within, certainly the side of the AS that speaks one proposal. What I think is the relevant component for the analysis, and certainly this is a place where the working group can help, is if we do have these sort of split domains, could we ever end up in a situation where the generated route resolution state, because that's the end goal that we're desiring out of each of these mechanisms, is there a possibility it's not exactly identical? And there's at least one of the threads inside of the Forum 3 stuff raised, I think, originally by Nats, covering a car scenario where LCMs are used and may not consistently resolve. That exact same type of analysis needs to happen here as well. Any other questions?
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Kalaj.
So I have a few comments. I think the first one is like kind of doing a CPR or emergency procedure for KISS principle. There are some comments from customers also, some of our operators, who said that if they had to interoperate between CT and car, they would go for either option A or option B and keep it simple. So I would request that also be listed as one of the simple options of how to do the interoperate if at all required. And then going to the slides, I had a comment on slide 5, the effective color. So the way the effective color is determined in a car, it also needs to consider the color extended community based on the new details that have been added to the appendix, though those have not made it to the procedure section. And then the second comment was about slide 15.3. It mentions that the resolution procedures are similar for car and CT. I think if you look at the text that is specified in the draft today, they are not similar. So CT clearly specifies that the endpoints need to be segregated into color buckets, and then resolution happens on those. And I think that is not clearly specified or underspecified in the car draft, to say the least. And then the next comment is about the CTOI in slide 11 to 14. So I don't see CTOI being used anywhere, though it is being maintained. And after thinking about it a bit, I think that CTOI is not required because the color is preserved in the RD color and the RD is preserved in the CTO-RD, so which allows you to reconstruct the original NLRI of each of these families. Now, what the effective color you want to propagate into a mapping scenario is what is the effective color of my adjacent domain and what is the agreement of what that color means, what is the intent it maps to in my local domain. I think what the original color was or the original intent was when the route was originated, that is less important, because what is more important is the transformations it has gone through. And when the route is coming into my domain from the adjacent domain, what is its color and what is the intent it maps to. So if you look at the slides 11 to 14, I don't see CTOA being used in any of the procedures. So that's one thing. And the fifth bullet in slide 11, it deletes all the transportless route targets. That kind of procedure seems a little dicey to me. So overall, it looks like these procedures, maybe we can make it work for some simple use cases, but when you have more involved scenarios, it may be really difficult to operate and manage. I'll leave that for the operators to comment on. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you to stop right now, even if you have more comments, because you've given me a large stack to unwind through. So let's try working through at least the ones that I recall you raising. So the simplified procedures, as you and I discussed, certainly that's something that somebody can write stuff down as text. I'm happy to take that text in there, and I'm certainly willing to try taking a swing at it myself. That said, it's less interop and more just simply the fact that we give up and we're devolving back to an existing mechanism. And basically both the CT and CAR documents discuss that in some detail. That's why I left it out of the first round of this. Second detail was route resolution procedures. My comments are being.
So I just gave it in the chat, all the points. Second was the effective color.
So the effective color, certainly we can take, I can review the CAR procedures and see what may need to change in terms of procedures from that. I'll work from that.
Sure.
The resolution procedure, as I mentioned, this is based on the IETF-113 discussion points. There was a long set of threads where we work through what is the effective behavior of each of the proposals. And I absolutely believe you in terms of the behavior for CT. Is my belief based on that set of discussions that CAR shares the same semantic, even though they think about it differently. And I will dig out the necessary thread from there, and certainly as part of this, the CT and CAR authors will have to agree. But is this something that we think are still the same exact resolution procedures? If it isn't, we've gotten issues that need to be clarified in both drafts, and that's one of the reasons we're setting up the GitHub stuff, is so that as we get these clarification points, we make sure that they're appropriately addressed in everybody's text. So CTOI, if it doesn't look like it's needed in these slides, I have a transcription error for my draft, but the desired behavior out of that is that when we're moving from a CT route, let's say that we have a CT route going to destination 10/8 with color 100 in the transport class, and we move into a CAR community, CAR context. CAR would normally, if it originated, that is 10/8 with color 100 and is the underlying key. The thing that we need to use the CTOI for is that both CT and CAR allow for changing of the color that's actually on the route, through, in the case of CT, changing the transport class as a remapping operation, or in the CAR context, setting an LCM. The necessary thing is that if we had a 10/8 color 100 route in a CT context, become that in the CAR context, and then transform back into a CT route, potentially with a intent change in two adjacent CAR domains, and then enters a CT domain. CT domain would still just simply use the effective color as it exited those remapping procedures. But if we entered a CAR domain again, it's important that you end up with the same CAR NLRI as you would have had in that first transform, because you want them to be comparable in case the two CAR domains have one connection to each other and a different connection through the tunneled CT domain. So this means that within the CAR domains, you still need that 10/8 if color 100 in a CAR NLRI context for consistent route selection. And the delete procedures, basically you don't want to be carrying around somebody else's protocols clutter when it's not relevant to your procedures. So the intent is to basically say, once you've done the remapping behavior, throw away the trash.
So about the third point, were you saying that the original route was a CT route?
That would be an example, yes.
Okay, because the RD color is already there for carrying the color of the CAR route. So
remapping can be done. So I will take the feedback that an example of why the CTOI mechanisms needed for preservation is probably desired in the draft, but the end result is that we want the car domains, across multiple transformations that contain the same NLRI.
So the CTOA is used to regenerate the car route, not the CT route.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So, and again, this is a 0-0 that was written very quickly, so clarifications are certainly appreciated. My desire here, and I agree with you, this seems like a lot of things to do to a set of routes, but these are automated things for if you actually want these to be carried, if you want the intents to be carried end to end. The inter-AS options, you're sort of giving up on carrying end to end color intent. Or at the very least, you may have to go with multiple physical sessions between various ASs to carry the individual intents that way. And I suspect that style of conversation will probably come up as we start discussing what VPN means for interop. If you don't have any further questions, I can proceed with Robert's next question. Okay. So Robert asks in chat, asked to list about 2 more points. Question A, how do you handle incremental additional functionality to either car and CT once your interop is running? That's a good question. We don't know because this is a completely wide open theoretical thing. The procedures may need to change. Certainly this is one of the reasons that people are trying to urge us to go to some sort of merge solution. That's one of the reasons I made the observation that a wider field to carry the color allows both the CT and car operational context to be used, and maybe the working group will take that up as a point for maybe a merge solution. Robert asks as part of his question B, when there is discussion, there is a lot of indications for a single solution. Would we still need to interop if there's a single solution adopted? No, probably not. The challenge that we have is that the longer we let the proposals continue running, even an interop solution effectively becomes a third protocol, and things just get combinatorically messier. Srihari, did you need me to read your question? Srihari replies no in chat. Are there any further questions? Okay, so this is all that I had. Again, this is just some initial thinking, and I think what this sort of shows is that as things are currently defined for much of the defined scenarios, the technologies do map fairly nicely between each other, and that if we actually wanted a ability to carry each other's routes through a mapping procedure, that is currently possible. Robert points out that this may become more difficult as the features are maintained. And finally, that there may be some option in terms of at least the NLRI keys to have a converged solution, and the working group would have to decide what it wants to do about carrying the forwarding state. So there is potentially some option for a merge solution. The working group just has to decide if that's what it wants to work on. That's it for me, Sue.
Jeff, I have nothing further, and Jeff's last point is well worthy to consider. Please give your chair's feedback if this merge solution looks to be a good way and the working group wants to work on that. If we're going to sort of settle things out, make sure the chairs understand what happened this week, and then Friday when we have our normal chairs meeting, or the next time we can meet, this is a holiday US week, we will send out a question about this if the merge solution looks like something the IDR should work on. Again, because we did have, as Robert put out, a call for it, but no consistency on whether car or CT could be chosen. So again, at each step, the chairs are trying to find out what the working group input on. The only other thing is I want to thank the the editors for the CAR draft, DJ and Swadesh for their continued hard work, and of the CT draft, Kali Raj and Nats. We appreciate all your active work, and we appreciate the passionate interplay in the working group. With that, we'll cut it off. And Tony Lee, we did make it in about 2 hours. That's it, Jeff. We can close at any time unless you have a comment. Jeff, any comments?
No further comments.
Lesser connectivity, any comments from you? I'm not seeing Kayer come in, so I'm going to assume his connectivity means he's in the chat. Okay. Thank you again, everyone, and we shall discuss and perhaps schedule another interim. Thank you very much. And that closes the interim. Have a great day, folks.